It is time for another game of Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial way to pick books for your TBR based solely on their cover. I am your host, the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. I'll be picking books from Goodreads new releases being released in March to add at least one book to my April TBR. And I'll be looking at young adult, science fiction, and fantasy. So let's go ahead and get started with young adult. And first up is Missing Clarissa by Ripley Jones. I don't know this author. When I see Ripley, I think of the Alien movie, but that's just me. The cover, it's okay. It's obviously a thriller mystery type cover. Everyone loves a dead girl. Let's call it a thriller. The texture on the background is sort of this dark woven, looks like a hard fabric. And there is a necklace. Looks like there's a little turquoise pendant. I'm not really that drawn to it. I'm not usually into thrillers to begin with, so I'm gonna have to shove it. Next up is Flower Heart by Catherine Blakewell. And this is a pretty cover. I like the illustration. There is this girl. It has a stained glass look. It's sort of half animated, half stained glass. It looks like there's something shining in her hand. So I'm going to guess this is some type of fantasy, a power she can't control, a curse she can't undo, a boy she can't forget. So it says this is young adult fantasy, and by the tone of the cover, I'm going to think this is going to have a big romance subplot. So not very crazy about that. Haven't heard of Catherine Blakewell before. I like the cover, but it's not hooking me. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Renaissance of Gwen Hathaway by Ashley Shoemaker. And it has sort of this cartoony cover. Looks like two people tried to play Romeo and Juliet or some type of Shakespearean play. She doesn't believe in fate, but fate has other plans. I'm thinking maybe this is a sapphic romance because I think these two characters look like both women. And I think it deals with maybe body positivity because one of the women looks a little bigger than we see a lot of times on these covers. I'm not into romance, and I am 90% sure this is a romance. Looks like a rom-com type of romance, so that could be fun for some of you, but it's not for me, so I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Chaos and Flame by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland, so two authors. They were sworn enemies. Fate had other plans, and we see, I'm guessing this is a phoenix and a dragon, which always makes me think of those shrimp and chicken meals you see at Chinese restaurants. Where'd that come from? I don't know. I like the illustration more of the phoenix and the dragon because I like that purple look. Actually, I'm sort of guessing this is a phoenix. But it looks a little generic to me. It looks like generic fantasy. I think I'm going to have to shut it. And the final book in young adult is Stars and Smoke by Marie Lu. Don't know this author, but apparently she's a New York Times bestselling author. I'm guessing this is a romance, but because of the title, Stars and Smoke, it has sort of this fantasy science fiction look to it. The illustration actually isn't that great in my opinion. There is the woman with a man sort of superimposed in front of it. Looks a little busy to me. I'm going to have to shove it. We didn't pick any young adult, so let's see if we have any luck with science fiction. First up is Flux by Jin-Woo Chong. I don't like this cover at all. I don't like this bright yellow. It reminds me of those old YouTube videos where everyone had these bright yellow thumbnails because they were supposed to grab people's attention. And I don't like this illustration. I don't like this whatever fractal graphic thing this is. Oh, I just think this is ugly. So, I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Antimatter Blues by Edward Ashton, a Mickey 7 novel. Now, since it says a Mickey 7 novel, I'm going to assume this is part of a series that I haven't been reading. The cover itself is pretty. I kind of like that blue variegated background coming to sort of pink, and then the blue rocks and the man at the center, or the person in the center. I'm getting far future science fiction, but because this is a series and it's not catching my attention that much, I'm going to have to shut it. Next up, we have The Mimicking of Known Successes by Melka Older. And there's a little recommendation by Charlie Jane Anders, who I actually like a lot. But, okay, this is science fiction. I like the background of the cover, sort of this, I guess it's a sun or a planet. Kind of looks like Jupiter in sort of these oranges and yellows. And there's sort of this silhouette of a futuristic city or space station. And then there's the silhouette of two people. So I actually think this might be a love story. And you know, I'm not crazy about love stories. But it's recommended by Charlie Jane Anders. I just don't want to read a romance, even though it may be a science fiction romance. So I'm gonna have to shove it. And next up is The New One by Evie Green. She's better in every way. Okay, I would never have guessed this is a science fiction book based on this cover. It looks more like a thriller, because thrillers have a lot of those ripped photographs type thing. This could be a horror novel because they mix in horror in with science fiction and fantasy. But she's better in every way, makes me think robotics or artificial intelligence. Gosh, this one's just confusing me because it looks like a thriller novel, could be horror. It might actually be hardcore science fiction. I don't know. Too confusing. I'm going to have to shove it. And finally, in science fiction, Loki's Ring by Stina Leicht. Apologies if I mispronounced that name. This cover, I don't like it. I just don't like this artwork. Loki, the god of mischief in Norse mythology, I don't think has anything to do with the storyline. So because this is science fiction, I'm going to think this is the name of a planet, the planet Loki, or the star system Loki. And there's this woman. I just don't like it. I think this is an ugly cover. I don't like it. So I'm going to have to shove it. We have not shelved one book in young adult or science fiction. Has that ever happened before? I don't find anything in fantasy. What are we going to do? I don't know. But let's go ahead and start with fantasy. First up is The Foxglove King by Hannah Whitten. I have not read Hannah Whitten before, but again, this is a New York Times bestselling author. It's an okay cover. I actually kind of like it. Even though I normally don't like the focus on the title with stuff around it, the stuff around this one's pretty intriguing. The flowers, this heart with a skull, it's like a trinket box. I don't know. It's interesting. This crown with the daggers or the teeth. I think I'm going to go ahead and shelve it. Am I shelving this because I just haven't shelved anything yet? I don't know. I do think this is a interesting cover, so. Next up is The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Osi Utomi. I'm going to assume maybe this is a African writer, a person of color. Maybe I shouldn't assume that. I don't know. I think this is an interesting cover. There's sort of a city on top and a person walking on the bottom with a reflection. There is a recommendation by C.L. Clarke. The Lies of the Ajungo. I don't know what this could be about. The fantasy. I'm not really drawn to it. Could be the illustration. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Faithless by C.L. Clarke. Every queen will take her due. And I've been hearing a lot about C.L. Clarke, so I'm kind of interested in reading something by this author. And we just saw a recommendation by C.L. Clarke. And I like this cover. I like the woman in the throne. She has sort of an attitude. I like the green and yellow sort of glowing background. I'm not sure what it is. Could be a forest. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and shelve it. Next up is Dead Country by Max Gladstone. That name's very familiar. Book 1 of the Craft Wars trilogy. So I know this is the start of a series, which I'm not crazy about. I like seeing at least 2 books out before picking up a series. The cover's interesting. There is this woman, but there's sort of this white, luminous figure of a person in front of her with these sort of crystal prismatic mountains. So I just don't want to jump into book 1 of the series. So I'm just going to have to shove it. Next up is a very interesting cover, The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. And it looks like a portrait, but then there are this red borders cutting into it, into a keyhole. Actually, the red part, I think, is a sketch of the girl. And then there's a keyhole. It's very interesting. Now, if I was in a bookstore, I would definitely look at the blurb, but I'm just picking books based on their cover, and I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions of what type of fantasy this could be. I'm getting historical, but I could be way off. It could be in a Regency era. I don't know. Love this cover enough to read the blurb, but just to choose it based on the cover, I think I'm going to have to shove it. Okay, our pickings were slim this month. We have just 2 books in fantasy, Foxglove King by Hannah Whitten and The Faithless by C.L. Clarke. Of these 2 covers, I think I'm going to have to go with The Faithless by C.L. Clarke. And it helps because I've been wanting to read something by this author. So let's go ahead and read the blurb. The Okay, we have a big problem right off the start. This is a book two. I'm looking at the cover again. I don't see any indication this is part of a series, but when this happens, I'm not going to read this book. I'm going to read the first book in the series. So let's go and look at book one of this series. Okay, the series is called Magic of the Lost. The first book is The Unbroken, published in 2021, also apparently a nominee for Best Fantasy in the Goodreads Choice Awards. So let's just go ahead and read the blurb, but I should mention I do really like this cover of The Unbroken, and I might have even picked it for Shelved or Shove It, I don't remember, although I know I didn't read it. So let's go ahead and read the blurb. Terrain is a soldier, stolen as a child and raised to kill and die for the Empire. Her only loyalty is to her fellow conscripts. But now, her company has been sent back to her homeland to stop a rebellion, and the ties of blood may be stronger than she thought. Luca needs a turncoat, someone desperate enough to tiptoe the bayonet's edge between treason and orders. Someone who can sway the rebels towards peace while Luca focuses on what really matters, getting her uncle off her throne. Through assassinations and massacres, in bedrooms and war rooms, Terrain and Luca will haggle over the price of a nation. But some things aren't for sale. So I also see there are tags here, fantasy, LGBT, lesbian, queer. So it's going to be a queer high fantasy, maybe. And I'm guessing there may be some type of love interest. But I'm not that mad about it because I have a feeling if there is a romance, it's not going to be the central theme. It's going to be overthrowing this person, Luca's uncle. And I like there's a lot of politics involved. We have assassinations and massacres. I am curious about this one. And if I like it, I'll of course jump and do the sequel. And maybe it's a duology. I have a feeling probably going to be a trilogy. I don't know. I'm very interested. Let me know what you would have picked based solely on their covers. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.